So here I have the beautiful Jourdan that I love so much. And so you run the account That's Not Love, and then you just got your YouTube up and running, right?
Yeah.
So before we dive in to more of our topics today, I want to just ask you a question to get to know you more. What is your favorite movie? If you could only
Oh
pick
my,
one.
oh my gosh. So I actually do have like a favorite movie. Like it's not the best movie that I love, but it is truly my favorite. Me and my husband have the same favorite movie. It's Dumb and Dumber.
It's a
Yeah.
classic, and it's funny because me and my husband watched that like 2 weeks ago.
Did you really? Oh my
Yeah.
gosh, we love it. Like it's like childhood to me. You know what I mean? Like I
hmm
watched it growing up. I love it.
Totally. And I'm like a Jim Carrey fan forever. His comedy is
Mhm.
just one of a kind. Well, I love getting to know more about you. Okay, so because we both talk a lot about love, marriage, faithfulness, dating, do you think right now is a really hard time in the dating pool to find a good significant other? And
Mhm.
if so, what's making it so difficult?
I do. And it's because of a few different, there's always different reasons, but I think that we have come so far in a society where women are, I feel like we learned how to look for red flags and we learned how to identify like what is a good partner, what is not a good partner. I also feel like the internet and just the world evolving has also made it then easier for men or women to hide their true selves and like live a double life and not be forthcoming, not be transparent with like people that they might be dating. A lot of men, unfortunately, before they're able to date women, they you know fall into online activities like that are going to damage their dating life. They're going to damage their relationships. Um, and so then by the time they're old enough to actually date, like they're in their 20s, it's just impossible. And I think that, a lot of I think it's, we've seen the value of like marriage, the value of like true committed relationships has like gone down. The rise of hookup culture. And then now when women actually want to settle down, um, it's like they don't, I think that they don't really always know how to go about finding the right guy, or they get stuck in like situationships, which is not a real relationship, but
hmm
they get stuck in these cycles with men that are just really degrading and manipulative, and you know how it is.
Totally. Well,
Yeah.
and I am so against like situationships, and I always try to tell my single friends how to avoid ending up in a casual relationship with a man. And I think a lot of people almost lie to themselves, like, oh, well, dating. I remember hearing this when I was dating my husband. Well, you don't have to take it too seriously. It can just be fun. And by the time I was dating my husband, I had already told myself, I am not taking this lightly. I'm not here to waste my time and give my energy to a man who's not going to commit to me. And so for me, I just set really, really strict physical boundaries. And that's the best way I know to avoid a situationship or this casual relationship with a guy. And also, I know some people don't agree with this, but I do believe in having a time limit on how much time you give a guy. Because time and time again, I've heard this from couples who have been successful. Obviously, there's exceptions, but more often than not, men will say they knew very quickly. Like my dad's like, I knew right away. My husband said, I knew right away. And I hear this so often. I completely agree with you that it's the secrecy that men have on the internet and the casualty that has come from hookup culture. So, what are some ways that you would tell your friends that you care about? Just even signs to look out for that a guy is taking you more casually. And for me, I think the biggest one I tell them is time limit and do not give them access to your body until you know that they're really committing to you, they've introduced you to their family, those types of things.
Oh, yeah, it's hard because some of the advice that I would typically have, sometimes women or even men, they just don't want to hear it. They're like, "Oh, that's too much or that's too hard." But what I do say is it's better to have strong boundaries. It's better to limit access to you, right? And potentially be single for longer than it would be to let your boundaries go, let your standards go, and then yeah, you're going to have more men that you're going to be in relationships with, but then you're going to have so much more trauma. You're going to have, I would rather spend my 20s single, alone, maybe sad because I would be alone, but I'd rather be lonely than with someone that is actively abusing me and cheating on me. That is, and I think that sometimes women, even myself at a young age, like you don't realize that because you just so badly want companionship. You so badly want to be loved. And kind of like what you said, I think the time limit thing, it's so hard to approach that, but I think that it is important, and it's not like, "Oh, you need to propose to me in 6 months," but it's like, I'm not going to be a girlfriend for 4 years. I'm not gonna be I mean, unless you're a teenager, like, that's different, but when you're an
Mhm.
adult and you have, you know, our years, especially as women, and this is another thing that I think women, unfortunately, in today's world, a lot of times we adopt a male mindset, like a toxic male mindset, not a healthy one. Um, and I know people say like my biological clock. I know that that's kind of silly, but it is true. So if having a family is something that we do desire and it's important to us, we cannot be afraid to say to a potential partner, like, I'm not just going to sit around and just, like I said, be a living girlfriend. I'm not going to sit around like I want commitment. Maybe I want marriage. Maybe I want kids. And my years and my youth is something you're never going to get back. And that's another thing I think a lot of times when girls are in their 20s and they're young and they're beautiful and like they're living their life, it truly feels like I'm going to be 25 forever. I'm going to be 22 forever. But then you blink and you're in your 30s, and you
Mhm.
look back and you realize, oh my gosh, like, you know, whatever. I mean, I did start having kids at, I think I was 22. So, I mean, I can't say what it's like to wait, but
Mhm.
either way, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter when you want to have kids. It's just the fact that if that's something you might want, yeah, women need to absolutely not be wasting their time with these guys that if he wanted to marry you, you would have a ring on your finger. If he wanted to take you off the market, as they say, basically, if he wanted to truly build a life with you, he's not just going to be like, yeah, you can move into my apartment and then like you're just living together for 7 years. Like, that's not what he would do if he wanted to build a life with you.
That is so good. And we just have to keep reiterating this and reminding women so that at some point it clicks. Like, yeah, if he is keeping you it like he's having you live in his home for 7 years, that's not a guy that's taking you seriously. And I love how you said having stronger boundaries is always the safer option. And what that made me think of is whenever I started dating my husband, and I never said this, with anger or like almost aggressively, I just communicated, I'm not interested in a casual relationship. And it doesn't mean that I'm, criticizing you if you are. I'm just not. And because he was the right guy and he was ready to get married, he was in his mind, he wanted to be a dad. He's like, I want to be a dad. I want to be a husband, and he was ready for it. And so my boundaries and communicating them didn't scare him off. And so that's what I also want women to remember is they probably hear us talk and they think, well, how am I going to do that? I'm going to scare these guys away. But that's good. It is good to
Good.
scare
Yes.
the yeah, to scare the guys away that aren't ready. And to me, this is very much black and white. A guy is either ready or he's not. he's ready to commit to you and he sees you as his wife, as someone that he wants a future with, or he's not. And men won't openly always tell women that they're not ready. They'll communicate it in ways like you said, oh, well, you're my girlfriend for 4 years and you're in your late 20s. And I completely agree. It's kind of this hard balance of, well, I don't know how long my biological clock is gonna be working. But I also am not willing to settle. And you can share your thoughts on this, but I always tell women I'm coming from this perspective where I've seen custody battles and I've seen how men devastate women's mental well-being because it's this nasty custody battle. I saw a TikTok the other day. I should have sent it to you. This girl was crying and she was like, I hate my baby daddy. And she's just sitting there weeping. And I'm thinking, this is so many women's reality. And so I always tell women, it's like you said, you're actually going to waste more time with the wrong guy if you don't just have those strong boundaries. And before you know it, you will come across that right guy who's ready for you. And it might feel like forever. It's like you said, you might be sad because you're feeling lonely and you're wondering if this is ever going to happen to you. Yet, that is still 1,000 times better than having kids with a guy that does not treat you well, prolonged your dating for years and years and years because he never really wanted to marry you. So it's like you're saying, have those stronger boundaries because you are going to attract the right guy. But I actually have another question for you, which since you said you had kids at 22, I got married at 28 and then we had a kid. I got pregnant 4 months after being married because I was just like, I'm ready. Like now I'm ready. And so I had kids, I guess it's maybe not considered late nowadays, but it is a little later than a lot of my friends. So knowing the situation of the world of dating right now, knowing that we have to set these stronger boundaries, do you think it's better to prolong your 20s a little bit to get married? Or do you think there's just really no clear-cut answer? It's just
I
situational.
think it is situational. I think
Mhm.
that, you know, it is definitely possible to the 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 type of partner that is going to give you the safety that you need and, provide emotionally or, literally, physically, financially, whatever for you, for your children and all of that, and he's going to be supportive of you. You could find that guy at 14 years old. You could literally find him at any age. You could find him
Mm,
at 44. I don't know. So yeah, I don't think it has anything to do with how old you are or
mhm,
when it happens. I just think it has everything to do truly, like we said, with number one. The other thing I think is important is to, people say, like, if you don't love yourself, how is anyone else going to love you, or how are you going to accept love? I think that another thing is when we don't have a good relationship with ourselves and we don't truly deeply love ourselves, that also pushes us into the arms of the wrong men. And I've been there, of like, you hate yourself, or you're just, maybe you are insecure, maybe you do have, self-esteem issues, or you're just unhappy or whatever. It is so much easier to just fill that void with, I just got to get a boyfriend, I just got to get someone, right? um and then you end up with the wrong person, and they do fill that void, but then it quickly turns into something that you never wanted. And I think, just if women, all of us, not just other women, but like myself included, if we can, truly, and it's so cliche, but literally learn to love ourselves and love being alone. I think that's something that is almost like a skill that you can learn, is like loving just like being alone. You know what I mean?
mm.
Um, the more we can love that, and we can, develop deep friendships that we value, um, the easier it's going to be into for waiting for that man. And like I said, I mean, you could definitely even meet someone like my husband. I met at 15, and then I have a very, very good friend who met her husband at 14 years old. Started dating him at 14. Now they've been together for like 17 years. And he is, aside from my husband, he is one of the best guys I've ever met. Like, she didn't know what she was looking for, but she did get lucky. She basically just has this like amazing husband. And it's like there's such a like wow, but it just shows me like it could happen at any point. But I think just understanding what are the red flags to look at no matter what your age is, even if you're in high school or you're 18 or 19 or like whatever.
Mm.
Because then at the same time, you could be in your 40s. You could be in your 40s and think, well, now I'm in my 40s, I'll definitely find the right guy. But even, that doesn't just your age doesn't matter. Um, if you're not looking for the right things, if you're not having the right boundaries or whatever. And I know again, 14 is like, and me myself being 15, that's like kind of crazy. It's not like I'm not suggesting that being like, tell your 14-year-olds. I'm just saying it's just this crazy you just never know. You just never know.
No, that, and I think that makes so much sense. And I think because I got married a little on the older side, for whatever reason, I love how you said it's important to enjoy being alone because that is what I think has been the common thread in some of really tragic stories. So I always think of one friend in particular who I met her in college and she always, you could tell she was always very lonely. And she just would call, text. Hey, can you hang out? Hey, because she just wanted to fill that time. And she had had a really traumatic upbringing. And I just remember I would get a little bit exhausted by it, but I think, man, girl, you have got to work through this because we all go through it in some way where we kind of have to get comfortable being alone. But hers was bad, and she started dating this guy immediately. I just was like, the first time I was ever around him, I just felt like, ugh, I do not like this guy. I do not trust him. And it just ended up being he was exactly who I thought he was. So he really appeared yeah, like I just remember, okay, is this guy looking down women's shirts? And I just know that it was such a disaster waiting to happen because she was so afraid to be alone that for her it was just like better to just end up in this toxic relationship because at least there was someone there. And then years down the road, unfaithfulness through her pregnancies, years down the road, just getting caught, getting caught. And I still think of that and I just think, man, is there something she could have done early on, like you said, to just get comfortable being alone? I almost feel, and maybe I'm oversimplifying this, but I almost feel like so much of this boils down to that as women is we're just trying to fill this void and it's better to sit alone and cry through those moments than jump into these relationships. And then because I was, 28 when I got married, I was very almost set in my personality and in my opinions. And I'd already been through school. I'd already just had a lot of mental shaping. And so by the time I met my husband, I almost had this perspective of like, you're handsome, you're sweet, we have the same faith, but that's not enough. I still need to basically vet you and figure out who you are. And so that's a little easier once you're 28, right? So then if a woman gets married young, do you feel like we should encourage them to put certain safeguards in place? Have the parents ask him quite more questions, be more involved, take him to a mentor. Maybe, I've known people knowing they're moving towards marriage, so they go to premarital counseling. I'm just thinking for women who are young and they don't even know, it's like you don't even know what red flags to look out for. Would you say that that young women should have certain safeguards in place before moving towards a serious relationship with a guy?
Number one, not bringing sexuality or not turning the relationship into a sexual relationship. I think because even as an adult, even as a full grown like woman, I do believe that once we introduce sex into a relationship, it can literally blind us. It's easier for women to maintain clarity in a relationship when we are saying, like, I don't want you to have access to my body until we've been together long enough that the safety and security I feel in the relationship is long standing and it's not, oh, you were nice to me for 3 months. that even goes for, I think honestly, any age. I think it really doesn't matter if you're younger or older, but really just focus on finding a guy that you are attracted to, but that you build a friendship first. Even if you're dating, even if you're exclusive, because the sexual chemistry, if it's there, it's going to be there. I think that people think, well, I'm so sexually attracted to this person, we have to introduce sexual things because I'm sexually attracted. But you could be sexually attracted to anyone. That doesn't mean that they're a good partner and doesn't mean it's a healthy relationship. I think it's much harder for a man to hide his true intentions. I think it is much harder for him to hide his red flags if, as women, we are not blinding ourselves even with lust. I think a lot of times, unfortunately, when girls are younger and if they do have sex, they then tell themselves, well, I've already slept with him, so I have to try to make it work. And then they let themselves be lied to, gaslit, manipulated, and they just keep telling themselves, oh, he'll change or, whatever. But again, they're having sex and they're giving him access to their bodies and they're truly believing that he loves them or he cares about them more than he does. For women, it affects us a lot more than it does for most men, which is kind of why I don't believe in hookup culture. I think for a lot of women, it's almost impossible or very difficult to sleep with a man and not develop feelings. And so I think even in a relationship, you're sleeping with him, you're having sex, he could be treating you terrible.
I think that that is some of the most underrated advice for women, young women to receive, but women of all ages. Because I have seen amongst women of all ages that they start overlooking these red flags once they started sleeping with a guy. I think having sex with a guy makes it so that you do overlook those red flags. All through dating my husband, I always say this gave me so much clarity to where if I lost him, I didn't care. Like it would still hurt, but that physical attachment changes the game.
Oh, yeah.
And yeah, and I don't know why so many people are in denial about this. I really don't know, but I wish every young woman in high school, in college could hear that. So, on that though, like talking about red flags, do you think at any age women can really vet a guy, say they're not sleeping with him, say that they're dating the right way, they're trying to be smart about it, trying to have good boundaries. Do you think that there's any foolproof way to make sure this guy doesn't have secrets, that he's not living in lust, that he's not secretly going and looking at pornography? Do you think you'll start to get a hint if something's up?
I think that truly, yeah, I truly do believe and think that if women can, I always talk about sexual discipline for men when it comes to porn, but if we're, we need it too because like you said, we're all we're sexual beings, right?
Hmm.
We all love sex. It's like the best thing ever, right? Whatever. But literally, as women, once you start to catch feelings for a guy, it's like we need to have sexual discipline and we need to be like, no, not going to go there. I'm going to wait. Like, I need to ride this out. Like, and I think too many women think that 6 weeks or 2 weeks or 3 months is a long enough period of time to get to know a guy. And it's not. 3 months is like that sweet spot of like, anyone can lie about who they are for 6 months. Anyone can hide something terrible for not 6 months, for 3 months. So I do think that if women can be like, no, I'm not going to let you have access to my body. I need full verification. That's what I call it. So tell women like, don't believe just words. Expect verification because we're living in a world where 90% of the men are looking at this stuff and they're living these unfaithful lives and they're entering into relationships on a lie. Like they're literally going in on a lie. Um, just expecting some type of verification. So yeah, number one, not introducing the sexual side of the relationship. I think that over time, especially if it's 6, 7, 8 months or even longer, if you don't have that attachment to him, like I've already slept with him, that type of thing. I think that you absolutely, as a woman, you would be able to see, like, that thing he said, that's not a little thing. That joke he made, like, that tells me something about him. Or even like guys that are asking women for pictures, sexual pictures. I always tell women, I'm like, that is a huge red flag. If a guy's asking for that. But I think that if they've already had sex and he asks for that to these women, it's like, oh, well, he just likes me. Like, oh, he just likes me. But it's like, no, like that's not a good sign. That is not a green flag. And I think that's something that used to be a green flag. We used to think, oh, he wants to look at my body. He thinks I'm so beautiful. That's how we used to believe. And a lot of women still believe that. They still believe if he's asking for pictures of me, it's because he likes me, but he's not. If he's asking for pictures of you, there's only one. Typically, in my opinion, there's one reason for that. If it's sexual pictures, and it's because he wants to self pleasure and he's already self pleasuring to other stuff on his phone. And that's, you do not want a man that has a sexual relationship with his phone, number one, because how's he going to have a relationship with you? You know what I mean? But, but I think the risk we are running into of marrying men and having babies with men, I don't care. I would rather scare someone away by saying, I don't want to commit to you. I don't want to get engaged unless you have an accountability app on your phone. I would rather scare that person away and him be like, no, I'm leaving you, than not have it. Have a family with him, have children with this man, and the whole time he was lying. And it could have been either avoided or it could have been caught if there was an accountability app in place. Because if 90% of guys are doing this stuff on their phones and they're virtually cheating on their phones, I feel like having an accountability app is almost like you move into a house and you put locks on the doors or something. It's like, well, I'm not expecting someone to break into my house, but I'm going to put the locks on the door because I want to feel safe, you know?
Hmm.
I think that also women just think, oh, he lets me look at his phone. He's not doing anything. But unfortunately, 2025, there are a million and one ways that you can hide it and, just whatever.
Hmm.
So, yeah.
I could agree with everything you've said. And I also, and again, I could be wrong, but I really do have this theory that if you don't sleep with a guy and you've been together for 6 to 8 months, like you said, you're going to notice something. I am a big believer that things always eventually seep out and leak out.
Yeah.
And it's always going to be like you said, it's like a joke, or they're caught off guard for a minute because unless you're like a sociopath, you can't really hide who you are over time if you haven't gotten a woman to sleep with you. What are some other things that you really believe would start to pop up in a guy that was very lustful so women could be on guard?
I just always say a man's sense of humor is going to tell you way more than anything else. Like their sense of humor, because and I think this goes for everyone, but really, I think for men, especially if they're living in lust and they're living in that, like having the porn addiction, because in today's world, living in lust for men pretty much is a porn addiction.
Hmm.
Because it's the easiest way to get that lust met. So that is how we're doing it. Maybe 50 years ago it was like being a peeping Tom, or it was like there was some other thing they were doing, but in today's world, that's what it is.
Hmm.
So I think that red flags for that issue are, if a man is making comments about another woman's body, and I say this all the time, not even in a good way. I think that sometimes guys will, when they're living in lust, they are objectifying women, like flat out. They're just doing it because that's what they're conditioning their self to do. And when they're with their guys, maybe with their friends, they'll objectify women and they'll talk about aspects of a woman's body that they like. But when they're with their girlfriend, they're still objectifying women, but maybe they'll say things like making fun of a woman's body, like, oh wow, like those pants look terrible on her, or like, oh, she's like fat or something. I'm not saying that, I'm saying that's what I've seen, right? Like guys like, say something, and then I think that women, it almost looks like a green flag. It's like, oh, like he doesn't think other women are attractive, but it's like, but if he's looking at another woman's body, that is a red flag. Even if he's pointing out negative, right, things he doesn't like, he is still telling you, I am always looking. Also, this is one that a lot of people don't realize is a connection, and I think that it is. But when a guy has road rage, I think is a huge sign that because I think it's a sign that he does not have healthy coping mechanisms.
Mm.
And one of his only coping mechanisms is that dopamine addiction. And I think that when they get behind the wheel, like they just have road rage. I also think, and I've seen this in a lot of relationships where a guy and a girl will be together, and like anytime they get in an argument or they get into a fight, the guy will use degrading words to his girlfriend. I truly believe that is so indicative of a man that is living in lust. Might sound kind of weird, but like a lot of times when guys are self-pleasuring to that stuff online, they're first of all, they are developing a hatred towards women, but also they're watching women on this screen. They're being called very degrading names. I think that's a lot of them. I know there's more, but I think that's like those are like the big ones that come to my mind.
hmm I think those are so good. The three that stand out to me so much as red flags that I've seen a lot of women overlook is criticizing other women's body. Also the words that they'll call you, if they'll just call you insults that are curse words.
Yeah.
And then
Even
the
if it's a joke.
oh, that and st you know that's a good point because women will kind of be like, "Oh, he's just kidding." And then the sending photos. And I think a lot of women haven't had a good example of a loving man, and so they don't even realize that that's not normal. And I actually follow this divorce attorney, and he was saying your father sets the norm for what the daughter for what you'll accept. And I find that to be so true. I really did grow up with a really kind dad, very kind to my mom, very kind to us, to where if a man were to insult me, even joking as like a curse word, I immediately would never be around him again. It would be so distasteful to me that I can't look past it. And so that's why I think you saying that is so important for women to hear. If he calls you a whore, a biatch, a whatever, any curse word towards you that it just at all, you should take that as an immediate red flag. Even if you're trying to like gaslight yourself, oh, well, it's not that big of a deal. It is a big deal. Why is he so carelessly and comfortably calling you that? How would you say in these dating in the early stages of dating, or even maybe they've been dating for 6 months and these things start popping up, what would you tell that woman?
I would say maybe like two options. I would
Mhm.
say if you start to see any red flags, right? Maybe you could give him a chance to be honest. You could give him a chance to be like, okay, tell me what's going on. Maybe give him the chance to seek help, give him the chance to change his behavior. Um, but at the end of the day, if he isn't transparent with you about what's really going on, what is the reasoning behind those things he was saying or doing or asking for, and he doesn't pursue like, yeah, I think I might need some help, or I might need this, or I might need that.
Mhm.
Absolutely, absolutely do not waste another second. I just think so many girls just believe, I'm not gonna find a guy that doesn't watch this stuff. Then be alone forever. But you will.
Something that interests me a lot is the idea of how many men are consuming this and what the statistics are. And the other day I Googled how many men in the Christian church are consuming pornography. And there was one site that said, like, in Christian churches, it's 70%. And so I just wonder what the true number is with like people who are religious at all. I would like to know how big of a problem is this? How many men who have these systems of accountability by, some kind of religion, by some kind of church setup. I wonder what your thoughts are on if you think that there would be a difference in, say, like Christian circles in statistics of men that watch versus non-Christian circles, or yeah.
I would assume that just by seeing the men that end up recovering or getting on the path of sobriety, and I've seen this said before, and I would agree with this, that it is, I do believe it is easier to recover from addictions like this when you have a faith, when you have some type of system in your life where you have a higher power, you have, you're praying and you have that relationship with someone who is, God, Jesus, right? I think it is easier, but I don't think, but I also think that a lot of Christian men think that because I'm a Christian or because I go to Bible study, I will be exempt from this addiction, or I will, through God's power, I will just be able to just be healed or whatever. I think that there's not enough intentional advice given to men in the Christian church on how do you recover? How do you stop doing this? And so a lot of Christian men, they might very badly want to not use this anymore, but they are just being told or believing, if I just read my Bible enough, I won't do this anymore.
Mm.
And so then maybe they read their Bible a lot, or maybe they start praying a lot, and they're like, that I'm still looking, what is wrong with me? Why isn't God helping me? But again, it's one of those things where it's like, God is powerful, but we are humans. We are in control of our bodies. We are susceptible to addiction. Our bodies are going to react in a literal scientific way, like a biological way. Our bodies are going to react to the addictions that we are falling into. So if I have a nicotine addiction to cigarettes or vaping or something, I would have to put in work to overcome that addiction. Reading my Bible is not going to, my brain is still going to be dependent on nicotine. And it's like that with dopamine. It's not just, and that's the other thing. I think that even Christian men or whatever, they think, well, it's just me being horny, but it's like, it's not, because maybe it started with you being horny like 35 years ago, and that's how it started, but it has developed into a dopamine addiction.
Mm.
And so your brain has literally rewired itself around getting these doses of dopamine. Men could, be told that, but they're not being told that, and they're not understanding that. So they don't know what to do to get better. So I think there's probably, in the Christian church, there are probably more men that want to recover, right? Whereas maybe outside of that, men that maybe don't have a faith, don't have a religion, I think maybe some of those men, they're not as aware, or don't see it as a problem. But yeah, with the statistics, I don't know if we're ever going to get true accurate answers. But it's fine. We don't need the true accurate answers to know it's a problem, and
Yeah.
to act on it, and to be like, let's talk about it, you know?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
Well, and I think I'm always hopeful, like, I hope that's true. And it's sad that I read that statistic that it was 70% amongst Christian men. And I was actually hopeful, like, oh, I hope it's that much better than the other statistics. And so
Yeah.
it's really sad that I was like hopeful about that, but I am hopeful. I'm like, oh, I'm hoping that there is some difference, because there should be, right? Like there actually should be a difference amongst practicing Christians and people who aren't. If you are practicing what you preach, then at the end of the day, there should be a difference. And if there's not, then that's obviously there's already a concerning problem, but then I'm like, wow, well, that's really concerning.
Yeah.
So I think that's such good advice, and I'm so glad that we had this conversation. And I just think that you're full of wisdom. So everyone can find you on TikTok at That's Not Love. And is your YouTube handle the same?
It's YouTube. It's That Is Not Love. That's what YouTube is for me.
Okay. Okay. Noted. Thank you.